If you would like to turn on captions for this webinar, either in English or in another language, we'd like to just share some instructions for how you may be able to do so. You can review them on the screen. My colleague Allie will also be dropping them in the chat. In brief, you would click captions on the bottom of your screen. If you don't see captions, you click more, and then you can see captions. You can then select your caption language and click show captions, and you should be all set. We, when Neighborhood Builders launched this Fresh Fridays series, probably about 18 months ago at this point, to create space for practitioners, community members, policymakers, and other interested folks to learn and share about community development, especially topics that are so deeply intertwined with the work of community development, like that which we will discuss today, the impact of zoning and zoning reform on multifamily housing development in Rhode Island. So today we'll explore how statewide and municipal zoning laws enable municipalities to reach their affordable housing goals. And we'll also talk about recent statewide zoning legislation and how they've impacted multifamily, or how we might anticipate that they will impact multifamily development. Before we get started, just a few quick logistical notes on the day. Please note, as you saw, we are recording this session as we intend to share it with interested folks who are not able to join us today. Second, if you have any questions or comments while one of the panelists is speaking, please feel free to leave it in the chat. We'll try to incorporate that into the session. We'll also have an open Q&A at the tail end of this discussion this morning, in which case folks are welcome to come off mute and ask any questions that they like. Third, we want to recommend that folks, if you hear a phrase or an acronym that you aren't familiar with, drop a note in the chat, and my colleague Allie, who's here with us, will be watching the chat and will be endeavoring to explain as is possible in real time. This is really a space for learning, so we encourage you all to use it as such. Fourth and finally, just to get a sense of who is in the room, would love for folks to take a minute, open the chat, introduce themselves, say hello, say where you're joining from, and really we thank you all for being here. So today I'm going to transition to introducing our panelists, and then we'll get right into it. So this morning we're joined by Brenda Clement, the Director of HousingWorks Rhode Island, as well as Bryce Kelley, Senior Research Analyst at HousingWorks Rhode Island. We're also joined by Joelle Rocha, Real Estate Development and Litigation Partner at Duffy and Sweeney, as well as Jen Hawkins, the President and CEO of One Neighborhood Builders. We thank you all for participating in this discussion, and we're going to get right into it. So to ground our discussion for the day, we're going to start with Brenda and Bryce from HousingWorks, who are going to give a brief presentation on zoning in Rhode Island. And we'll also share a little bit more about the Rhode Island Zoning Atlas, a new tool that HousingWorks has been working really hard on and was debuted this past fall. And we're all very excited to have as a resource now in our community. Brenda, Bryce, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity. We joke, or I joke all the time, that we'll talk about housing and zoning and other things, whether we're invited to or not. So, so thanks for inviting us to come. Bryce is just starting to share his screen in a second. While he does that, I also want to acknowledge our colleague Annette Bourne, our Research and Policy Director, is on with us, and Annette is a critical part of this project as well as our annual housing fact book, which I know many of you are familiar with, but can also be found online. And it's really the fact book and some of the regional work that Annette has started throughout the fact book that really led us to the zoning atlas work. So thanks, Annette, for leading the charge on that. And then for Bryce Kelley, who you'll hear from in a second, but also Chris Schutz, formerly of Church Community Housing Corporation, unfortunately just left us to move back home to Philadelphia, but has done enormous amount of work as part of this project. And this project is part of a national project called the National Zoning Atlas. I just want to spend about 2 seconds talking a little bit about the history of zoning and why we have zoning. to begin with, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bryce to dive in deep into the, or not deep, but at least to give you a little taste of the tool as well too. So I think, and I'm looking at the folks on the call, I think most people understand what zoning is and why we've had it. It's simply the practice of designating areas for specific use. So, you create a residential district, you create a business district, you create an industrial district in a community. And zoning impacts housing in many, many ways because there are regulations, dimensional requirements, all of these things that guide what can be built and how it can be built in a local community as well too. Zoning plays a very important role, right? And let's switch to the next slide, Bryce, so that we can just give a very quick history. And thanks to Bryce and Annette for pulling this together. But zoning started to happen in the early 1900s. And if you remember your history, that was when we started to see migration of people into the cities from farmlands, right? And from farms, looking for jobs, looking for better opportunities, when we saw lots of factory building and development. And so when lots of people come into a small geographic area, it obviously creates lots of problems around sanitation and use and other things, which is why we started to see the growth of zoning. And it was meant and really was a public safety tool in trying to address health and safety issues by separating industrial and residential use. But unfortunately, as its use continued to evolve, it started to develop some not so pleasant side effects as well too. And we started to see zoning starting to become, instead of an inclusionary tool where we were trying to address safe and health for everyone, we started to see it become an exclusionary tool. The use of zoning, however, was upheld in the Supreme Court. And again, we're not anti-zoning at HousingWorks either. We see value in the tool for local planning. But it also, in that particular case, also started to pave the way for the dominance of single-family home zoning in our state as well, too. And then we know throughout the 50s and 60s in particular, when we started to see suburbanization happen and change in cities and demographics in cities, we started to see redlining, racially restrictive covenants, and many other real estate practices around steering people in certain populations to certain neighborhoods. And those are really kind of the uglier side of zoning that in many cases we're still trying to deal with and trying to address. HousingWorks' vision is that we have Rhode Island communities embrace a wide variety of housing options and choices in communities. And so we started to work with the National Zoning Atlas Project so that we could utilize this tool to help communities plan for an inclusive rather than an exclusive approach to zoning. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bryce to jump right in for this exciting tool.
Okay, thanks. So I included this quick diagram just to kind of level set what some of those dimensional regulations really do in relation to actual housing. You can see on the left, different setbacks, maximum height, minimum lot width. On the right, there's maximal coverage. These are all things that we've integrated into the Rhode Island Zoning Atlas. But I like to just include this visual, even if it's just something you can refer back to in PDF form, because I found it really helpful for me to wrap my head around these topics. So it's important, as Brenda alluded to, zoning is a relatively newer thing in the context of New England and a lot of the housing in this area, a lot of Rhode Island's housing stock. In fact, Rhode Island has some of the oldest housing stock in the nation. So it's not surprising that housing stock doesn't always reflect zoning. It might not meet by right requirements because it might have a dimensional variance. So an individual might have gone for a zoning board to get relief from some zoning regulations. It might have had to attain a special use permit, which would require, in most cases, to have a public hearing. Obviously zoning, a use is broken out typically between something that's by right or allowed, something that requires a special use permit, and something that's not allowed. It might be built, a house might be built on a substandard lot of record, or it might, in the case of what we were just talking about, predate zoning regulations entirely, in which case it's legally non-conforming. And so much of Rhode Island and the places that we love in the state are you know, drastically legally non-conforming or majority legally non-conforming. A lot of our town centers, our villages, those places that ironically build this community character that is then used, the community character is then used to sometimes justify dimensional regulations that those areas in Rhode Island don't even meet themselves, which is an interesting phenomenon. And I've said, you know, multiple times now, a lot of our favorite places in Rhode Island are legally non-conforming. And to that point, I just included this example of a home in the Cranston context, a 3-family home. It fits in with the neighborhood. It doesn't look garish or anything like that. It's on Park Ave, so it's a major thoroughfare. It's in an A6 zoning district. 3-family homes aren't allowed in that zoning district. So use regulations, it doesn't meet. Lot size, it exists on a 5,000 square foot lot size. An A6 zoning district would, you know, obviously require a 6,000 square foot lot size. And you can kind of go through those dimensional regulations that were illustrated in that diagram and kind of one by one see where it doesn't meet. But again, it really fits into the neighborhood. Yeah, I think it was built in 1920-ish, so probably predates a lot of zoning regulations that are now, you know, in Cranston, in place in Cranston. So I just like to kind of provide some of these examples whenever possible, to kind of illustrate that point. So to the zoning atlas, so we spent almost 2 years, maybe a little bit more than 2 years, analyzing over 6,000 pages of zoning text throughout Rhode Island. We logged 699 relevant zoning districts. The amount of zoning districts really ranged throughout the state from, you know, some municipalities in Western Rhode Island, more agricultural, municipalities having maybe 5 zoning districts, all the way to upwards of 30 or 35 zoning districts in our more urban core municipalities. So there's a wide range of the kinds of municipalities that we analyzed in this project. And so I want to give a brief explainer on these designations of zoning types. So we have our primary residential zoning types. Those are going to be zones that allow for only residential and basically nothing else. With the National Zoning Atlas methodology, it sometimes included agricultural lands that allowed for you know, a single family home as part of that. There's mixed with residential. So that's going to be your zoning districts that allow for residential uses alongside, you know, businesses and commercial. It can be within the same building as a mixed use building, but mostly it just needs to allow for that mix of uses within the zoning district itself. And then finally, non-residential zoning districts. Those are going to be, you know, your open space districts, your protected districts, your industrial districts that allow for no residential of any kind. And so when we look at Rhode Island, unsurprisingly, 81% of the state is zoned for primary residential uses. Only 9% of the state is zoned for mixed with residential. And then finally, we found that 10% of the state is zoned for that non-residential designation. And so actually going into how these areas are zoned as it pertains to residential development, we found that, again, unsurprisingly, 87% of the state is zoned for single family by right. That drops down drastically to 20% for 2-family by right. And I just want to note that 3 and 4 family by right, typically we would kind of combine those into just multifamily by right. But the National Zoning Atlas methodology that they wanted us to use had to break it out. But that changes slightly, 9 to 8%. But you can see that drastic drop in the density of housing and how it's allowed throughout Rhode Island's zoning districts. And it's important to note that, you know, single family by right is generally allowed. Single family is allowed in, you know, those areas that allow for 2-family, 3-family, and 4-family, almost always. And so navigating the zoning atlas, I'm going to try to walk through this really quickly. So when you arrive on the zoning atlas page, you're going to have this little disclaimer that you need to click through. The zoning atlas is broken out into pretty much 5 parts. There's the map itself. There's the section on the top left that you'll be able to filter through housing treatments, 1 through 4 plus family housing, along with accessory dwelling units, which of course is going to have to be updated very soon as towns start to update their ordinances. Right below that, you're going to have your layer options. So you can select different layers, conservation lands, infrastructure, stuff like that we've added. We plan to add more, but that's just kind of the initial set. Bottom right is the legend, so that's just going to explain, excuse me, what those colors correspond to. And then the top right, one of my favorite features, and I think it's underutilized in a lot of these types of maps, is the search feature, where you can search your home address, you can search your place of business, you can search a point of interest in Rhode Island, and it'll bring you directly to that spot, and you can explore the zoning that way. And so I'm just going to walk through quickly some different kind of uses for this, some different, case studies. So here we're looking for where in the state you can allow for single family. In this case, that is by right. In this, we had to kind of categorize that as allowed conditional, but that's by right. And we're interested in where you can build single family by right on a lot that is half acre or lower. And you can see, within Rhode Island, it's a lot of our urban core cities and towns, the suburban outlying cities and towns that allow for those smaller lots for single family. But maybe we're interested in multifamily. Maybe we're interested in where you can build 4 family by right, 4 or more family by right. You can see, oh, that's interesting. Richmond and Hopkinton are really popping on this map, but let's apply the same minimum lot size features that we did for single family. And we'll see, again, Hopkinton, Richmond disappear. Most of the area within the state is in our urban core or in our village, more denser sections, historically dense sections of the state. And then quickly, I'll just, highlight some of those layer feature options that we have. So here we're showing state conservation lands that obviously covers a lot of Washington County, covers a lot of the western part of the state. You can kind of play with those different protected land features. Here's the urban services boundary where the state really wants density directed towards. It's where we have a lot of our infrastructure and amenities. You can see that, interestingly, there's not a lot of multifamily. I've selected 3 family by right here in the filtering options, and there's not a lot of multifamily by right within our urban services boundary. And here shows infrastructure, water and sewer areas. It really corresponds very closely to the urban services boundary. And so another feature of this map that's really interesting and helpful is that you can click into specific municipalities and specific zoning districts within municipalities to really get into that data, learn more that way. So here we've clicked into Providence. The first card, that pop-up that you see, the first card you'll see will just kind of explain the summary statistics of that municipality. So, the breakout of zoning district types, the number of zoning districts, 1 through 4 family, how those are treated throughout the municipality, how that breaks out. And then if you click this little arrow button, it'll actually bring you to the specific zoning district that you clicked on, you happen to click on, where you specifically clicked on, and it'll actually give you the entire set of attributes for that zoning district. So you can scroll through and see how 1 family is treated, all the dimensional regulations, how 4 family, all the way up to 4 family, accessory dwelling units, planned residential development treatment. So you can see basically everything that's been integrated into this map. All the data is available right there to learn. And that's all I've got. We really hope everyone kind of jumps on our website and checks out the Rhode Island Zoning Atlas. I've included a QR code here, but you can get there by navigating to the HousingWorks website and our learning center. It's also recently, the National Zoning Atlas, our partner in this, has stood up their own map that's standardized across the whole nation. The interface is slightly different, but that's also worth checking out as well. It's really interesting. But I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Bryce.
Yep.
That's really, really wonderful. And I appreciate Brenda for the introductory comments as well. Such rich information in this specific resource. And this is, of course, just a tiny little snippet. So I think one thing that we're excited about is that hopefully those of you who maybe weren't as familiar with the Zoning Atlas, this wet your whistle a little bit, because the HousingWorks team is rolling out all kinds of different opportunities for folks to learn more and to engage with the Zoning Atlas. And so we'd be happy to share some of those things coming out of today's conversation. As we transition to a conversation that incorporates Jen and Joelle, I want to specifically note the inclusion of that example in Cranston and how it's helpful to kind of see what this really looks like in communities. And that while that was just one little lot in Cranston, that, as Bryce said, there's examples that we could pick up from every single municipality and village across the state. So to that end, I'm going to point this in the direction of Joelle. Joelle, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself? And then from your perspective as a real estate attorney, why zoning and land use is important, really specifically to multifamily and affordable housing.
Could help if I unmute. Sure. So Joelle Rocha, I'm a partner at Duffy and Sweeney. As Grace mentioned, I have been practicing for 18 years in the area of land use, real estate development, and litigation, because it's sometimes inevitable coming out of really what I do. I do all types of development from residential, mixed use, commercial, solar, right across the board. I do a lot of affordable housing projects. And I most recently, starting last year, am on the speaker's policy team to draft his legislation. Did the package last year. I'm on board this year. So I see most of you up at the State House often, and just trying to break through and address this housing crisis as best as we can. So I think as to the question about zoning and planning as related to land use, Brenda and Bryce really set the background for this. And I think the Zoning Atlas tool is outstanding, especially as to break through this, there really is a housing crisis, and how did we get here? Brenda highlighted a lot of the zoning came about so places could put single family zoning in. And that is one of the biggest problems leading us into this housing crisis, is trying to put multifamily or even single family affordable on smaller lots is very difficult when most of the state is zoned single family only, and really over at least over a half an acre. Most of it is really over 2 acres. So what happens there is, it's exclusionary to these larger projects or even the smaller projects. You do still have at meetings, unfortunately, you go in with the comprehensive permit tool that the state established in 1991, allows developers to come in if they're providing a percentage of affordable housing. And it was supposed to be a streamlined tool. Some of those meetings that I've been at are not very pleasant with the public's understanding of what low and moderate income housing is, who it really impacts, which is everybody. And I think what has been done and what really needs to be done is a hard look at zoning as to all the communities that can contribute to this problem, and changing their zoning and adapting.
Thank you so much. And I want to turn it now to Jen Hawkins from One Neighborhood Builders. Jen, One Neighborhood Builders is a developer. We develop affordable housing around the state. Can you talk about an example or two of a time when zoning impacted One Neighborhood Builders developments?
Sure. So yeah, good morning, everyone. And thanks so much to my colleagues for joining this Fresh Friday. So, I was thinking back on 2 current projects that we have in development, one in East Providence and one in Cumberland, Rhode Island. And interestingly, the time, so the one in East Providence is called Center City Apartments. Will be 144 apartments on just shy of a 3-acre parcel on Taunton Avenue, a thoroughfare through East Providence. When we had originally went through planning process, the town had just creeped over the 10% threshold, so we could not avail ourselves of the comprehensive permit process. Interestingly, because that 10% number oscillates constantly depending on how many market rate units or affordable units are being developed in a community, they are now once again below the threshold of 10%, and we could today avail ourselves of the comprehensive permit. So I just want to put a note in that oscillation is difficult for developers and planning officials to navigate. So at that time, we went through the process. Had we been able to develop it today after the legislative changes that have just been implemented, we would have been able to utilize the unified development process and not have to go to the zoning board. Not having to go to the zoning board in that additional meeting may sound like, oh, one less meeting. But in fact, the work and the costs associated with preparing for that meeting, all of the extra engineering and steps that were required to seek release was quite substantial. So I just want to note that had we done that project today, we would not have had to go through that process. And what's really important is that there is an overlay district in East Providence that we probably would have been able to avail ourselves of, which had a much reduced parking requirement. I just want to quickly touch on one other project in Cumberland, where I think it even further illustrates the improvements of the zoning code and how it really helps support affordable housing in Rhode Island. So in Cumberland, we have a project called Steeple and Stone, and this will be 44 apartments. Just like East Providence, 100% are affordable. So in this area, it's far less than 10%, and it was very clear that we could utilize a comprehensive permit process. So with the changes in the zoning rules, there is no longer the requirement of having a master plan approval and a preliminary plan approval. They sort of do away with that first stage of master plan. So again, one less meeting, all the costs and associated time with preparing for that meeting would be removed, which is huge. But I think the big hook here is that under the new zoning requirements, you only need to have one parking space for 2 bedrooms or less. So for 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom or efficiency, only need 1 parking space. The town of Cumberland required us to have 2 parking spaces per unit, irrespective of the size. Under this new regulation, we would have had to have 24 less parking spaces, which meant we could have had way more units and way more green space, really making a significantly better project, a more financially competitive project. So, shucks, I wish the law had changed a year ago, but I think that's a very concrete example of how these tweaks to the zoning are really going to help improve affordable housing development in Rhode Island.
Thank you so much, Jen. And I think one of the things that you're highlighting is the complexity. So for those who have some zoning knowledge, you may be following along. And for those who don't, it may feel like, whoa, there's so many terms and so many complexities to this. And really, I think that's one of the 4 points that we're hoping comes across today, that level of complexity that not just developers have to navigate, but the municipalities have to work with developers in the cases where they're trying to encourage development to happen. It adds additional steps, additional resources to developments advancing. I want to turn back to Brenda and Bryce. We talked about the zoning atlas and how wonderful of a tool it is from the perspective of really creating some transparency and accessibility to very complex zoning laws around the state. Can you all talk a little bit, I'll let either of you respond, of course. Can you all talk a little bit about how do you hope people will use the zoning atlas and what might be relevant to different groups, different individuals and organizations as they endeavor to learn more about zoning?
I'll take the first stab, Brenda. I hope that the zoning atlas is useful for people at the state level, people at the municipal level, developers, and then of course I think there's a lot of use for residents as well. I think if you're looking at the zoning atlas from that high state level with high level data pullouts, it can be really useful if you're someone in municipal planning or even someone on a town council, to be able to concretely understand how your zoning impacts housing in a really real way, and then also how you understand just over the river and the border, you know, for the next municipality, how does zoning work there as well? I think oftentimes municipalities will think about their city or town in a silo, right, with zoning, and they won't necessarily understand, oh, just across the road where there's another town, how zoning is treated there. And I hope that that will spur more collaborative relationships when it comes to zoning and land use. And then at the residential level, I think, you know, that search function that I highlighted is really important and really interesting. If you don't know much about zoning, put your address in that search function, see what the zoning is at your house and understand, oh, like, you know, I'm in a R1 zoning district. I need this kind of setback or parking, or, you know, starting to familiarize yourself with those layers of zoning, right, that we're trying to kind of go over and make that less of an abstract concept, right? And hopefully, you know, when you do go out to a public hearing, you'll be more informed and maybe hopefully more supportive of those housing developments.
Thanks, Bryce. And I would just add that I think all of this and the tool itself, I think is important for ongoing conversations and immediate conversations that we need to have in our communities around transit corridors and transit hubs, but also climate change. Part of what Bryce has been spending a lot of time on is looking at the sea level rise maps and the potential loss of housing units as we continue to see flooding and climate change impacts happen as the community. So we know that it's an important part of broader conversations around land use and planning as well too as the state. And you know, the other striking thing for me is always looking at the urban growth boundary and then looking at how many places within what should be where growth is happening don't allow growth to happen. So as we continue to look at investments around the infrastructure funding and money as well too, and address water and sewer challenges as well too, we really need to have some hard conversations about how we direct growth in those areas.
Thank you, Brenda. And I see Joelle, you came off mute. Did you want to share something?
I was just to share that, and Jen can probably echo this too, from the developer's perspective, or counsel for the developers. You know, it's when a client comes to you, and there's a lot of out-of-state residential private developers interested in developing here. It's just been a lot of red tape and a lot of length of time. But the first thing I do is get on, and if the community doesn't have GIS, it's kind of a slog to try to figure out how, you know, what's the zoning, what's this. Chances are it's not permitted, but you want to look at the area. This zoning atlas kind of puts everything in one place. Allows you to look at the site, at the zoning around it, especially for the communities that do not have a publicly accessible GIS system to pull this information.
And I'll just add, if I can just, you know, jump on that, is we had to draw a couple of municipalities zoning district maps and actually digitalize those maps for this project, which I think is interesting, but I think is better for that kind of democratization of information aspect as well.
Thank you all very much. Jen, did you have something you want to share? And I'll say as Jen's about to jump in, we're going to transition to open Q&A. Once Jen wraps up, so I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Allie. So get your questions ready. Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I was just going to state that, you know, as from a developer perspective, we want to be able to build a project that makes most sense for the community in which we're working, but we're often shoehorned into finding lots where there's a path of least resistance, which ultimately doesn't produce the best housing for the community, right? So you may find a great parcel of land. It's affordable for the acquisition price. It's near transportation, etc. But it's zoned in a way that doesn't allow for multifamily. And as a developer, we have to walk away from that great parcel to find something else that is the path of least resistance. And I think that's deeply unfortunate because it doesn't produce the best housing for the best community. Sorry for that frog in my throat, and I look forward to hearing questions. I saw that Annette had her hand up too.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, Allie, I'm going to hand it over to you to facilitate the last 10 minutes of our conversation here in open Q&A. And Annette has very patiently been waiting with her hand up.
Yes, thanks, Grace, and thanks everyone, and thanks for a lively discussion in the chat too. I think this has generated, clearly this is a topic that's striking for a lot of people. So let's go to Annette, and then we'll go to Tina, and then I see some questions in the chat as well. But let's start with Annette and Tina.
Thank you very much. Of course, my hat's off to Bryce. I can't tell you the number of hours that he and our consultant, Chris Schutz, have put into this. But I just wanted to point out that it wasn't just in the early 20th century that we have legally non-conforming lots. A city like Cranston actually downzoned in 1966. So all of Eastern Cranston would have allowed single-family homes on 5,000 square foot lots. And then in 1966, it downzoned to what is 6,000 square foot lots. So my entire neighborhood, every neighborhood east of Route 5, more or less, is legally non-conforming. There is a report out of Boston that looks at the Boston suburbs. I'm going to drop it in the chat. This is a story that happened all over the United States. When you think of the Fair Housing Law being passed in 1968, it is pretty clear what was going on at this time. So I urge everybody here, wherever it is that you live, look at the history of your zoning. We are not here by mistake, and we can unravel this only with honest, brave discussions. And I do hope that the urban services boundary, which encompasses all of Cranston and Warwick, which are the two biggest parties to this kind of exemption, really examine their needs. And it isn't just about subsidized affordable, it is about housing affordability for everyone who lives here in our state and who wants to live here in our state. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Annette. Appreciate your highlighting that. Tina, did you want to
I just kind of wanted to jump in. Good morning, everybody. I don't know, for those who don't know me, I run my own nonprofit called RAMP, Real Access Motivates Progress, as just was appointed by the President to the United States Access Board for Architecture and Transportation. If you really want to have the open and honest conversation, the entire state is non-conforming, because we are not conforming to the 40% of Rhode Islanders who use a mobility aid. That's a walker, wheelchair, or a cane. We only have 2.3% of actual physical housing that I myself, who is in a power wheelchair, could actually get into our state. It's a 9.5-year waiting list. A 25 or 30-year-old in a wheelchair should not have to wait on a list for 9.5 years to only be able to put in a high rise or a manor. That's not going to be real life. That's not community for that person to live a full active life. We're all talking about affordable housing, but we're not talking about the accessibility of the housing. We just opened 3 brand new shelters in the state that no one is even close to being wheelchair accessible. Where do those people go? You lose housing because it's not affordable. There's no housing for you to go. And then you can't even go to a shelter because it's not available to you. So we do have a major housing crisis in this state. We are listed last, the last accessible state in the entire country. That's sad. Especially when we had a congressman for 20 years in a wheelchair, we are listed last for accessibility. I'm sorry to rant about this, but I'm dealing with people who are on the streets, and it's not because they can't afford it. It's not because, there's no place, it doesn't exist. The housing that we need just does not exist. And we're the only state in the country that has a home modification grant that can help single family homes and multifamily homes to become accessible. We're the only state that has a workability grant that gives businesses $5,000 to become accessible once you live in a neighborhood that's accessible, but we're not utilizing it. And they're all feel good things, but if you're not using it, you're not making. I mean, they had a bill last night that I testified on called about universal design. It's one of those fluffy pieces that says, we're talking about you, but we're not actually building for you. So it's better than nothing. So no one opposed it, but it's nowhere near what we need in this state. I'm sorry to go on, but it's something that's near and dear to me.
No, thank you, Tina. I appreciate you raising this, and I think it highlights how zoning is just one part of the conversation. We need to be talking about accessibility with affordability, and that there are many layers to this conversation. So I appreciate you adding that other layer, and look forward to talking more and hearing more about your work in advocacy and how we can support it. I
put my
saw
email
yes.
and stuff in the chat. If anybody wanted to contact me afterwards, it's already in the chat.
Awesome, thank you. So I had one question about I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Federal Act for the Preservation of American Antiquities. It's an act from 1906. This is from Rochelle. So it's providing general legal protection of cultural and natural resources of historic and scientific interest on federal lands. Is there a similar law in Rhode Island, or are there any municipalities that have a local version of the same intentions? Anyone know about this one? If not, we'll follow up and we'll look into it.
Hey, Rochelle, nothing as broad as the federal law. There's some historic preservation and landscape preservation languages I'm recalling in the Historic Preservation Act, but nothing that mirrors the federal law that I'm familiar with.
Awesome, thank you. And then I see a question about parking. It seems pretty specific about that. Just kind of if there's any, I'm just gathering your question as kind of if you want to elaborate more.
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to say what I was trying to say there. We actually hold a lot of Section 8 people. I mean, we build new and then rent only to them, mostly to them. I shouldn't say only, but mostly to them. So what I was trying to say there is like, we own several urban lots, and the new zoning lots, the new zoning rules do help us, but at the same time, the main thing that really affects those smaller lots, like, is the parking. They did not change that rule. They still expect the same parking, parking number of vehicles for let's say if it's R3 zone, you can expect to build 3 family, but then you are expected to have 3 parking spots. That kind of nullifies the whole thing. Like if it's a bigger issue, yeah.
Jen, go for it.
Yeah, and same is the case with
I was just going to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I would be happy to talk to you about parking, but I think, parking is the third rail here. And I think that it is traffic and parking is often proxies for not wanting affordable housing. And I think we have to all as a community that cares, I think, about the expansion of affordable housing, capital A affordable housing, per the comments in the chat. I think that we have to be really cognizant of that and think really hard about when we're pushing for that. We have been successful in some of the communities in which we work, notably Central Falls, where we are developing also 44 apartments and only actually have 2 parking spaces. The project is on a high-speed, rapid RIPTA bus line. It's in a community with only 27% car ownership, and it's a community that's prioritizing housing over parking. So I think that there are opportunities for more progressive parking requirements, and I really applaud the municipalities that have taken that stance.
Thank you. I guess it's just there's not that easy solution there, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome. Brenda, you want to have a last comment before we wrap up?
Yeah, well, just a quick comment on the parking. I mean, Jen is absolutely right about it being a major problem and issue because but building and encouraging development around transit corridors and transit hubs where people can access transit is also part of the solution, right? And we have a pilot project, that Department of Housing will be rolling out soon around TOD, but we need to broaden that, right? And we need to just make that part of the culture so that people who don't have access to a car or can't have access to a car, can't afford a car, or can't use a car for whatever reason, have better transit options as well too. So these are all connected issues, as we've said.
Awesome. And I see Bryce is saying you guys are going to be analyzing zoning around transit in the coming months. Awesome. This was such a lively discussion. I'm so sorry that we have to wrap up and close it, but thank you to all who asked questions and contributed to livening this discussion. Really appreciate it. So thank you all for joining for our January Fresh Fridays. And thank you to our panelists for bringing this conversation and opening up this dialogue. We hope you'll consider joining for a future Fresh Friday. Our next one will be in February, to be announced exactly what it's going to be on, but something around transit actually. So excited, be looking forward to that. And as you exit the Zoom meeting, there will be a survey in your browser, so to help us improve these conversations. And please feel free to email me. My email was on the Zoom link, so please let me know if you want to chat more. And hope you have a great rest of your Friday. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Friday.